She learned early that stillness could be armor. In the small cafe tucked between a tailor shop and a shuttered bookstore, she moved like a shadow cast by someone else's body. She wiped counters that were already clean. She refilled sugar jars that were still full. She memorized the rhythm of the room so thoroughly that she could cross it without being noticed, slipping between chairs and conversations as if she were part of the air itself. She kept her eyes down, not because she was ashamed, but because eye contact invited questions. Questions invited interest. Interest invited attachment, and attachment was dangerous. At 28, she had perfected the art of disappearing while standing in plain sight. Her hair was always tied back, practical and unremarkable. Her clothes were neutral colors chosen not for beauty but for camouflage, nothing bright, nothing memorable, nothing that said, "Look at me." She spoke softly, only when necessary, her words efficient and polite, never lingering long enough to turn into conversation. The regulars barely remembered her name. They remembered the coffee was always right, that the place felt calm even when it was crowded, that someone was always watching without seeming to. She noticed everything. The way certain men sat with their backs to the wall, the subtle shifts in tone when unfamiliar faces entered, the scrape of a chair that meant someone was standing too quickly, the difference between laughter and the sound that came just before raised voices. She catalogued danger the way other people catalogued menus. Behind the counter, in a narrow space meant for storage, there was a small table pushed against the wall. A box of crayons sat neatly arranged beside a stack of blank paper. A tiny sweater hung from a hook where no customer would ever see it. Every few minutes, without looking obvious, she glanced toward that back room. It was instinct, muscle memory, the kind that never went away. She never sat with her back turned to the door, never allowed herself to be boxed into corners. She knew exactly how long it would take to reach the exit from any point in the cafe, how many steps, how many obstacles, where hands might grab, where bodies might block. This was not paranoia. This was preparation. There were moments when someone tried to draw her out, a friendly joke from a customer, a compliment she pretended not to hear, an invitation to talk longer than required. She responded with a brief smile that didn't reach her eyes, then stepped away before warmth could take root. Because warmth made you careless. And carelessness cost her everything once. She did not talk about the past, not because she had forgotten it, but because remembering too openly felt like leaving a door unlocked. There were things she carried that did not belong in daylight, nights she never spoke of, decisions that lived under her skin like old scars, invisible but sensitive to touch. Sometimes, when the cafe was quiet, her hands would still for a fraction of a second, fingers tightening around a cloth or a cup as if grounding herself. Her breath would slow deliberately, controlled. Whatever memory tried to surface was pushed back down, gently but firmly. She had learned that survival was not loud. It was patient. There was a way she listened for small sounds that did not belong, a cough that came from the wrong corner, footsteps that paused instead of passing, the creak of the door opening at an hour when it should not. When she sensed those things, her body responded before her mind did, shoulders squared slightly, jaw set, her attention sharpened to a narrow, lethal focus, even if outwardly she looked the same. Quiet, small, forgettable. No one looking at her would have guessed the calculations running behind her eyes. No one would have guessed how much she had lost or how much she was protecting. Because that was the truth beneath her invisibility. She was not hiding from the world. She was standing between it and something precious. Every decision she made was measured against an invisible weight, where she stood, how long she stayed, who she trusted, when she smiled, when she did not. Attachment was a luxury she could not afford. Love was a risk she did not allow herself to imagine. And yet, every few minutes, her gaze flicked again toward the back room, toward the quiet presence she guarded with her entire being. Whatever had broken her in the past had taught her one unshakable rule. She could disappear if she needed to. But the moment real danger arrived, she would become visible in ways no one would expect. Because she was not weak. She was surviving. The child did not carry fear the way adults did. She carried curiosity like a light held out in front of her small body, moving through the world without hesitation. While everyone else measured distance and threat, she felt the room with a quiet certainty that unsettled people who had learned too much about danger. She did not understand rules the way grown-ups did not, the silent agreements about who to avoid. And when to look away, she sensed energy instead, warmth and cold, safety and absence, and she trusted that sense more than words. She wandered with soft steps, her shoes barely making sound as she drifted from the back room toward the front, her fingers still stained with color from the crayons she had been holding moments earlier. The hum of the cafe did not overwhelm her, it wrapped around her like a song. She half-remembered voices, cups, movement, all blending into something alive and breathing. She paused once, turning her head, as if listening to something no one else could hear, then continued forward, drawn by something deeper than sight. Behind the counter, the woman noticed immediately. Her body reacted before thought. Her spine straightened just slightly, her breath caught low in her chest. She did not call out, did not rush forward. She knew panic spread faster than danger. She moved instead, placing herself subtly in the path between the child and the rest of the room. Every step calculated, every muscle ready to shift from shadow to shield in a heartbeat. The child stopped near the counter, looking up at faces that glanced past her without seeing her fully. Adults rarely did. She smiled anyway, not because she wanted attention, but because smiling felt like breathing to her, easy and natural. She rocked gently on her heels, humming under her breath a tune without shape yet full of intention. The melody slipped between the noise of the cafe, unnoticed by most, but not by the woman who froze for the smallest fraction of time when she heard it. That sound stirred something old, something buried under layers of discipline and restraint. The woman felt it press against her ribs like a memory knocking from the inside. She swallowed, steadying herself, reminding her hands to keep moving, reminding her face to remain calm. She did not look at the child, not directly. She had learned that looking too long invited questions she could not answer yet. The child turned her head then, as if sensing the shift, her eyes narrowing, not in fear but focus. She looked at the woman with complete trust, a look that carried no doubt, no hesitation, only certainty that the space between them was safe. The woman felt the familiar ache tighten in her chest, the one she never allowed to surface fully. She nodded once, a silent promise carried between them without words. Then the room changed. The air shifted, not with sound but with pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks. Chairs stopped moving, voices dropped, instincts flared. The woman felt it instantly. Her muscles tensed, her awareness sharpened, every sense locking onto the entrance. Without her turning to look, she knew someone dangerous had arrived. Not loud danger, not chaotic danger, but the kind that moved with control and expectation. The child felt it too, but where others stiffened, she leaned forward, curiosity pulling her like gravity. She took a step, then another. The woman moved again, faster this time, not rushing, but redirecting, positioning herself closer, her body, a quiet barrier ready to intercept. Yet the child slipped past with the effortless determination of someone who had never been taught to be afraid. The woman's heart slammed hard once, then settled into a cold, steady beat. This was the moment she had prepared for in 1,000 silent rehearsals. Her mind calculated distance, angles, outcomes, her body poised to become visible, if needed to draw attention away, to absorb whatever came next. But the child did not slow. She walked straight toward the source of the pressure, her small hand lifting with intention, not chaos, not accident, but recognition, as if something inside her had already decided this was where she needed to be. The woman reached out too late, her fingers closing on air as the space between shadow and storm collapsed. And in that instant, before contact, before consequence, before the room could remember how to breathe, the woman understood something that unsettled her more than fear ever had. The child was not wandering. She was choosing. He entered without announcement, without hurry, without needing permission, and the room reacted before anyone understood why. Chairs stopped scraping, voices softened, hands paused mid-motion, even the espresso machine seemed suddenly too loud, then fell quiet as if it sensed the shift. The woman felt it strike her first, not fear exactly, but recognition, the kind that comes when a predator steps into shared space, not wild, not reckless, but disciplined, contained, dangerous in the way storms are dangerous when they move slowly and choose where to land. She did not look at him immediately. She had learned that staring invited notice and notice invited consequences. Instead, she tracked him through reflections, the glass of the pastry case, the polished metal of the machine, the subtle way bodies angled away from the door to give him room. He wore no symbols that marked rank, no visible weapons, no raised voice, yet every man in the room knew exactly who he was, or at least what he represented: power that did not need to prove itself, violence that did not rush, grief that sat heavy behind control. The mafia boss moved with precision. Each step measured his presence, bending the space around him as naturally as gravity. He did not scan the room adjusted to him. His suit was dark, simple, cut for movement, not show. His posture straight, but not rigid, the kind of stillness that came from long discipline, not comfort. And when he removed his coat, the woman saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight carried there not just of authority, but of something older, something unresolved. His face was calm, but not empty. There was exhaustion etched beneath restraint, the kind that did not fade with sleep. Behind her calm surface, the woman recalculated everything: distance to the child, line of sight, exits, angles of approach. She knew the cost of being seen by men like him. She had survived a world adjacent to his long enough to know that power always noticed what disrupted its order, and children disrupted everything. She shifted subtly, placing herself between him and the child without drawing attention. Her hands steady, her breathing, even though her pulse thundered low and fast. She told herself this was coincidence, that he would take his drink and leave, that their worlds would pass without collision. But the child had already stopped moving. The woman felt it before she saw it, the silence sharpening, not with fear, but anticipation. The child stood still, her body angled forward, her small head tilted, eyes locked onto the man, as if he were the only solid thing left in the room. The humming that had filled her moments earlier returned, soft and uncertain, then steadied into something deliberate, a melody without words, without history, yet filled with meaning. The sound slid under skin and memory. It cut through the mafia boss like a blade made of air. He froze. Not the stiffening of a man threatened, but the stillness of someone struck from within. His breath caught shallow, his hand paused inches from the counter. And for the first time since entering the room, his attention sharpened, fully focused on the source of the sound. His jaw tightened, his fingers flexed once, as if grounding himself. The woman saw it, then the crack in the armor, the flicker of something raw beneath. Command, grief, memory, loss, colliding all at once. The child stepped forward. One step, then another, each small footfall echoing louder than gunfire ever could. The woman moved, instinct screaming for the child to stop. But her voice did not come. This was the moment she had feared, the one she had prepared for in quiet calculations, the one where she would have to choose between staying invisible and stepping fully into the light to protect what mattered most. But before she could move, before anyone could react, the child reached him. Small fingers closed around silk. The tie. The room ceased to exist. The mafia boss looked down at the child as if seeing a ghost, as if something long buried had reached up and taken form. His control fractured just enough to reveal truth. He did not pull away, did not shout, did not signal his men. Instead, he stood there, eyes locked, with the child breathing shallow, chest tight, as the melody continued. And in that suspended moment, the woman understood the danger had already changed shape. This was no longer about power. It was about something the mafia boss had lost and never buried. And the child had found it. The moment stretched thin like glass under pressure. No one moved, not the men near the door, not the barista frozen behind the machine. not even the guards whose hands hovered close to their jackets, instinct screaming, orders their minds had not yet caught up with what their eyes were seeing: a child, holding the tie of the most feared man in the room, the kind of mistake that ended lives quickly and quietly. The woman felt time slow in a way she had only known once before during a night. She never spoke of a night when sound had faded, and choices had arrived sharp and immediate. Her body reacted before fear could form. She stepped forward, every sense awake, every muscle ready. Her invisibility burned away, replaced by something solid and fierce she had hidden for years. She reached out, but stopped herself a breath before touching the child, because sudden movement could turn everything wrong. The mafia boss did not move. His men watched him, not the child, waiting for the signal that never came. The silence grew heavy, thick with expectation. The woman could hear her own heartbeat, low and controlled. She positioned herself close enough that if hands reached for the child, they would have to pass through her first. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She knew weakness had no currency here. She simply stood, present, visible, unafraid. The child looked up at the man, her small fingers still wrapped in silk, her grip not desperate, not clumsy, but certain. She did not tug, she did not speak, she simply held on, as if anchoring herself to something steady, something known. The humming continued, soft and uneven yet intentional, the sound threaded through the room, slipping past tension and authority, settling deep into memory. The mafia boss inhaled sharply, his control slipping just enough for the woman to see it. His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiffened, then eased, as if he were fighting something internal, something far more dangerous than any enemy in the room. His gaze locked on the child, and in that gaze the woman saw grief, raw and unguarded, the kind that hollowed men from the inside and left power standing alone without purpose. Slowly, deliberately, he bent his knees, lowering himself to the child's level. The movement alone sent a ripple through the room, a king kneeling, without command, without threat, without reason. Anyone could understand. The guards froze, their confusion palpable. The woman felt the ground shift beneath her. This was not part of any rulebook she knew. The child smiled. It was not wide, not excited, but gentle, the smile of someone who had found what they were looking for. She lifted her other hand and touched his face, her fingers warm against skin that had known only hardness for too long. The mafia boss exhaled, the sound breaking from his chest like a fracture, and something in his eyes changed. The woman stepped closer, now her voice finally finding form, low, steady, controlled. Please, she said softly. She is just a child. She did not apologize, she did not beg, she stated truth like a boundary drawn in the air. The mafia boss looked up at her, then really looked, and something in his expression shifted again. Recognition, not of face, but of resolve. He saw in her what he himself had lost once and carried still. The child released the tie at last, not because she was made to, but because she was finished. She leaned back slightly, still humming, still calm. The woman moved instantly, scooping her up, holding her close, her body forming a shield, her arms wrapped tight, heart pounding yet steady. She did not turn away. She met the mafia boss's gaze head on, daring consequence, daring judgment, daring fate. The room waited. Then the mafia boss spoke, his voice rough, low, stripped of command. Where did she learn that song? The woman felt the past press forward, heavy and dangerous, but she did not look away. She answered simply, honestly, I taught it to her years ago. The silence that followed was different now, not violent, not sharp, but charged with something unnamed, something irreversible. The woman understood in that moment that whatever had just happened could not be undone. The child had crossed a line no one saw coming, and the man she held power over had not punished her, he had been changed. And somewhere deep beneath fear and preparation, beneath survival and silence, the woman realized this encounter was not ending here, it was only beginning. The sound did not fade when the child stopped humming. It lingered in the air like a fingerprint pressed into memory. The room remained frozen. But inside the mafia boss, something was unraveling fast and uncontrollably. The melody had reached a place he had sealed shut with discipline and violence, a place where hospitals smelled like disinfectant and time moved in beeps and whispered prayers. He had not heard that song in years, not since a small voice sang it between labored breaths, holding onto life with stubborn hope. His chest tightened painfully, his vision blurred just enough to make the room tilt. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and saw white walls, small hands, thin fingers wrapped around his own. He saw himself sitting helpless and useless while machines did the work he could not do. The memory hit hard without warning. And when he opened his eyes again, the child was still there, calm, unafraid, looking at him like she knew him beyond his name, beyond his reputation, beyond blood. The woman held the child close, now her arms firm, protective, her body angled to shield, yet she did not retreat. She watched him carefully, every instinct sharp, every calculation ready. This was the most dangerous kind of moment, not one ruled by anger, but by emotion. She knew that grief could turn men reckless faster than rage ever could. He looked at her again, studying her face as if trying to place it not from memory, but from feeling. There was something familiar there, not beauty, not recognition, but weight, like someone who had carried responsibility too young and never set it down. His voice, when it came, was quieter, stripped of authority and threat. "Where did you learn that song?" The woman felt the question land inside her like a stone dropped into deep water. She hesitated, only a heartbeat, not because she did not know the answer, but because the truth carried risk. She measured him one last time, then chose honesty over safety, because sometimes lies were more dangerous than truth. "I made it," she said softly, "years ago, for children who were afraid." The child shifted slightly in her arms, resting her head against the woman's shoulder, still peaceful, still present. The mafia boss nodded once, slowly absorbing the words, as if each one added weight to something already heavy. His hands trembled briefly. Before he folded them together, forcing stillness, he swallowed hard. "That song," he said, "was sung to me once by someone I lost." The room held its breath again, but this silence was different. It felt intimate, fragile, as if a wrong sound could shatter something delicate. The woman felt her chest ache. She did not ask who he lost. She already knew loss wore many faces and needed no explanation. Instead, she said quietly, "Sometimes songs find their way back to where they belong." His eyes snapped back to her, sharp, searching. Something in her answer struck deeper than comfort. It suggested connection, not coincidence. He glanced down at the child again, and something like awe crossed his face. "She is not afraid of me," he said, not accusing, not surprised, simply stating fact. The woman shook her head. "She is afraid of loud noises, of strangers, of the dark. She is afraid of being left behind, but not of you." "Why?" he asked. The woman did not answer immediately. She looked at the child, brushing a curl from her forehead, then met his gaze. "Because she knows when someone is hurting," she said, "and she knows when someone will protect her." The mafia boss leaned back slightly, as if the words had struck him. "Physically protect her," he repeated quietly, as if testing the shape of the idea in his mouth. Something in his posture softened imperceptibly. The guards noticed the shift. The woman noticed everything. The danger in the room had not vanished, but it had transformed, no longer sharp and immediate, but slow and deliberate, like a tide pulling inward. "This should not have happened," he said finally, not to her, not to the room, but to himself, and yet it did, and now it could not be undone. He straightened again, authority settling back into place, though changed, altered by something he could not control. "I want to talk," he said to the woman, "alone, not here." Her heart kicked once hard, but she nodded. She had expected this moment, prepared for it, and still it felt unreal. The child stirred, lifting her head and smiling at him again, a small, satisfied smile, like someone who had completed an important task without needing praise. As they prepared to move, as eyes followed, and whispers waited, the woman understood the truth forming quietly beneath the fear, beneath the tension, beneath survival. The song had opened a door. And once opened, nothing would ever return to silence again. They did not move toward the back or the door or anywhere obvious. Instead, he turned, slightly angling his body in a way that blocked sight lines without drawing attention, a silent command his men understood instantly. The room loosened just enough for breath to return. Conversations restarted, low and uncertain. But every ear strained toward the space the woman and the child now occupied beside him. The woman felt the shift, felt the invisible perimeter form around them, protection or containment she could not yet tell. He walked first, not fast, not slow, each step deliberate, and she followed, holding the child close, her senses alive, cataloging everything: the sound of shoes on tile, the position of the guards, the way hands stayed visible, the way eyes never left them. This was not an invitation, it was a transition, and once crossed there would be no returning to before. They stopped near the side of the cafe, where light filtered through narrow windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The woman felt exposed here, but she kept her posture steady, her back straight, her chin lifted just enough to signal she would not fold under pressure. The child rested quietly against her shoulder, one small hand gripping her collar, the other still relaxed, as if she trusted this space completely. He turned to face them, and for the first time she saw him fully, without the barrier of distance or reputation. The lines around his eyes were deeper than she expected, carved by years of restraint, not indulgence. His expression was controlled, but there was an edge beneath it, something raw, straining against discipline. She recognized that look; she had seen it in mirrors late at night when memory slipped past defenses. "You know more than you are saying," he said, his voice low, even measured, not a threat, not yet, but an observation weighted with certainty. She met his gaze without flinching. "I know enough," she replied, carefully choosing each word like a step across unstable ground. "About the song," he pressed, "how it came to you, how it stayed with you." The woman inhaled slowly, grounding herself. The child shifted slightly, and she adjusted her hold, a reflexive movement, protective, without being possessive. "Some memories are not owned," she said, "they are carried, they pass through people and leave marks." His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but focus. His attention sharpened like a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. "You were there," he said, not asking, stating it. "You were present when it mattered." The weight of the truth settled between them, heavy and undeniable. The woman felt the past stir, restless and dangerous. She had survived by burying it deep, but now it pressed upward, demanding acknowledgement. She did not deny it. She nodded once, controlled, restrained yes. The child lifted her head, then looking from the woman to the man, her eyes curious, not anxious. She sensed tension, but not threat. The woman felt a pang at that innocence, the kind that made adults dangerous when they failed to protect it. "Why did you disappear?" he asked quietly. The question carried no accusation, only something close to disbelief. "You were part of something important, and then you vanished." The woman swallowed. The truth was sharp-edged with consequences. "I disappeared because staying would have destroyed me," she said, "because grief does not belong only to those who lose, but also to those who witness and survive." His breath caught just slightly. The words struck deeper than expected. He had spent years believing pain belonged only to him, that loss was a private burden. No one else had the right to touch her. Words challenged that belief, unsettled it. "And the child," he said, his gaze dropping briefly to her, "why does she know the song?" The woman felt the smallest tremor move through her arms. The answer lived in the space between love and fear. "Because I sang it to her when she was small," she said, "because I sang it when the world was loud and unsafe, because it reminded me that softness could still exist." His jaw tightened, then eased, as if he were fighting something internal, something breaking free. He looked away for a moment, toward the door, toward the life he ruled with iron control, then back at her. And when their eyes met again, something had shifted. "This is not coincidence," he said slowly. "I do not believe in coincidence anymore." "Neither do I," she answered. Silence settled between them, but it was no longer empty. It was charged, layered with meaning and unresolved truth. The woman understood now that hiding would no longer be possible. Whatever had drawn the child to him had bound their lives together, whether she wanted it or not. And somewhere deep inside her, where fear and instinct tangled, she realized the most dangerous part was not the man standing in front of her. It was the past that had finally caught up. He did not rush the next words. He never rushed anything that mattered. Silence was a tool he had mastered, and he used it now, letting it stretch until she felt its weight settle into her bones. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. but there was something different beneath it, not command, but intention. "I want you under my protection," he said, "not here, not just today, but permanently." The woman did not react outwardly, but inside, every alarm sharpened. Protection was never free, it always came with expectation, with control, with debt. She adjusted the child against her shoulder, grounding herself, before answering. Protection from what she asked, already knowing the answer. "From everything," he said simply, "from men who see vulnerability as invitation, from the kind of attention that follows moments like this, from the past you thought you buried, and from the future that will come looking for you now that you have been seen." She studied him carefully, not the legend, not the title, but the man in front of her, the restraint in his posture, the way he kept his hands visible, the way his eyes never left the child for long. She saw no hunger there, no possessiveness, only calculation, mixed with something dangerously close to concern, and that unsettled her more than threats ever could. "I do not belong to anyone," she said quietly, her tone steady, unyielding. "I do not trade safety for obedience." A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, but acknowledgement. "I would not accept you if you did," he replied. "I do not need submission, I need trust, and that cannot be taken." The room around them seemed to fade, the cafe noise dulling into something distant. This conversation existed in its own space, sealed off from the world she had avoided for years. She felt the ground shifting beneath her, survival rules cracking under the pressure of possibility. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. "A role," he said, "a place beside me, not behind me. You would act as liaison for matters that require discretion and humanity. You would have access, protection, resources, and autonomy. Your child would be untouchable under my name." She stiffened at that. Her child was not leverage, she said sharply. He did not flinch, nor did he retreat. "She is not leverage," he said, "she is reason, and I do not speak lightly about reason." The child stirred, then lifting her head, her gaze drifting between them, sensing intensity without fear, she reached out, touching his sleeve absent-mindedly, and the woman felt him go still again, but he did not pull away. He let the small hand rest there as if it anchored him. "And the cost?" she asked, "because there is always a cost." He nodded, acknowledging the truth. "Boundaries," he said, "first you set them, and I respect them. Loyalty, not blind, but chosen honesty above convenience, and time to build trust, not demand it." The woman exhaled slowly. This was not how power usually spoke to her. Experience told her offers came wrapped in sweetness, then tightened into cages. This felt different, and that frightened her more than manipulation would have. "You are asking me to step into your world," she said. "No," he corrected, "I am asking you to let me step into yours carefully." Her heart thudded once hard, then steadied. She looked down at the child, brushing a curl from her forehead. This decision was no longer about her alone, it never had been, and she hated that truth and accepted it all at once. "If I agree," she said, "you do not control where I live, who I see, or how I raise her. If I walk away, I do so without consequence. If at any point I believe this endangers her, it ends immediately." He listened without interruption, then inclined his head, agreed, "And to ensure it, I will put it in writing. Protections enforced by my own code, breaking them would cost me more than reputation." She searched his face for deception, and found none, only resolve and something like relief, as if this negotiation mattered to him beyond strategy. "This is not charity," she said again, needing to hear it out loud. "It is not," he replied, "it is balance. You bring something I lost, and I will not pretend otherwise, but I will not take it from you. I will earn the right to stand near it." Silence fell again, heavier than before, but not hostile. The woman realized then that by speaking she had already stepped into visibility. There was no returning to the shadows, not after this, not after him. She did not answer yet, but the choice was forming quietly, undeniably. And somewhere between fear and instinct, she understood the truth. The most powerful move she could make now was not to disappear, but to choose. The danger did not announce itself immediately, it never did. It crept in quietly, wearing patience and familiarity, the kind that studied before striking, and the woman felt it before anyone said a word. She felt it in the way conversations paused, when she entered rooms that were not meant for her, in the way eyes lingered too long, then looked away, in the way men measured her not with curiosity but calculation. The syndicate noticed her presence faster than it accepted it, and acceptance was not something freely given in a world built on hierarchy and blood. The mafia boss had spoken her protection into existence, but protection drew attention, and attention drew enemies, those who believed power should remain untouched by softness, and those who mistook restraint for weakness. One afternoon, as the child played under watchful eyes in a secured room, the woman walked the corridor alone, her steps steady, her posture calm, but her senses flared. Every sound amplified the low murmur of voices behind a closed door, the shift in air when someone stepped into her path without invitation. He was not one of the boss men. She recognized him immediately by the absence of restraint, by the confidence sharpened into arrogance, by the smile that did not reach his eyes. A lieutenant or underboss, one of the old guard who measured loyalty in fear and control in blood. He did not block her path completely, just enough to force her to stop. "You have become a topic of interest," he said lightly, as if discussing whether rather than survival. She did not step back, she did not apologize, she met his gaze directly. "I am not interested in being discussed," she replied. His smile widened, not amused, but assessing. "You should be careful," he said. "People get curious when rules bend, when the boss changes patterns, when a woman and a child walk where they should not." The woman felt the threat coil beneath the words like a snake ready to strike. "Curiosity turns into mistakes," he continued, "and mistakes have consequences." She did not raise her voice, she did not show fear. "I am not a mistake," she said simply, "and neither is he." Something flickered across his face, irritation perhaps, or something closer to unease. He leaned in, slightly lowering his voice. "You should understand how this world works. Softness is a liability. Children, our leverage, and grief makes men careless." The woman felt heat rise sharp and controlled. She stepped closer, closing the distance just enough to make her presence undeniable. "You misunderstand," she said, her tone quiet but unyielding. "I am not his weakness, and my child is not your leverage, and if you believe otherwise, you are making the only mistake that matters." His smile vanished, replaced by something colder, something offended. "You speak boldly for someone who arrived uninvited." "I arrived chosen," she replied, "and that difference matters." He studied her again, recalculating the power balance, and she saw it then, the flicker of recognition, the realization that she was not what he had assumed, not prey, not decoration, not temporary comfort, but something anchored, something defended. He straightened, masking his reaction with indifference. "We will see," he said, stepping aside. "The world always corrects itself." She walked past him without turning her back, her heart pounding steady and deliberate. She did not run, she did not hurry. She knew predators noticed retreat more than confidence. When she reached the corner, she released the breath she had been holding, her hands trembling only slightly. That evening, the mafia boss noticed the change immediately. He always did. His gaze sharpened when he saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she positioned herself closer to exits, the way she checked doors twice without thinking. "Someone spoke to you," he said, not a question. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "Who?" She told him everything, not embellishing, not minimizing. She described the words, the tone, the implication. She did not ask for reassurance. She did not plead for protection. She simply presented facts like a woman who understood consequence. The room darkened, not with rage, but with something colder, more dangerous. The mafia boss listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, then he nodded once. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "You did exactly right." She searched his face. What will you do? He did not answer immediately. He walked to the window, looking out over a city that feared his name and trusted his restraint. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, lethal. He will be removed from influence, without spectacle, without blood, and without anyone touching you or the child. She exhaled slowly, relief mixing with something heavier, guilt perhaps, or the weight of knowing that her presence had shifted balance, whether she wanted it to or not. You should not have to navigate this alone, he said, turning back to her. You were right, visibility carries risk, but invisibility carries cost too, and I will not allow either to harm you. In that moment, she understood the truth of his power. It was not in violence, but in choice and restraint and accountability. The enemy had revealed himself and been neutralized, not with bloodshed, but with authority that refused to bend. And she realized then that the world had noticed her. But it had also learned something important. She was not unprotected. And she was not afraid. The truth did not arrive like an explosion. It settled in slowly, heavy and undeniable as the night deepened. And the building quieted. The woman sat across from him in a private room, far from eyes and ears, the child asleep on a couch nearby, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, guarded by silence and soft light. The mafia boss watched the child longer than necessary, as if imprinting proof that this calm existed, that it was real. Then he turned back to the woman, and the space between them felt charged with something final. You said you were there when it mattered, he began quietly, and the words carried a weight that pressed into her chest. I need to understand what that means, not as a boss, not as a man of this world, but as a father. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself. She had carried this truth alone for too long, and now it demanded air. She spoke slowly, choosing clarity over protection. Years ago, she said, I volunteered in a hospital ward for children who were dying. I sang to them when the nights were too long, when the pain was too loud, when parents could not stay awake any longer. His breath caught almost imperceptibly. She continued, your son was there. He was brave in a way that broke me. He loved stories, and he loved one song more than any other, the one the child hummed today. He asked me to sing it every night. He called it his safe song. The room seemed to contract around them. The mafia boss leaned forward, elbows on knees, his composure thinning. You knew him, he said, and it was not a question. Yes, she replied. I held his hand when you and your wife were forced to rest. I stayed when machines took over the room and fear pressed against the walls. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. He told me about you. He talked about your strength, about how safe he felt when you were near, even when you were not there. The man who ruled through restraint pressed his palms together, fighting for control. I was not there enough, he said flatly. You were there when it counted, she answered immediately, because he believed you were, and belief is what children hold on to when nothing else works. Silence settled, heavy and reverent. The child shifted in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. The woman glanced at her, then back at him. There is more, she said, and her voice wavered for the first time. He nodded, bracing himself. After he passed, she continued, I kept singing the song to myself. It helped me survive, leaving the ward, leaving the grief, leaving everything that felt too heavy. Then, when I became a mother, I sang it again, not because I planned to, but because my body remembered the melody. Before my mind did, I sang it to calm her when the world felt unsafe. The mafia boss closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, shining with restrained emotion. And the child, he asked, his voice rough, how did she know to come to me? The woman swallowed, because she has heard the song since she could breathe, because she knows what safety sounds like, because when you walked in, she felt the same presence she feels when the song holds her steady. His shoulders sagged just slightly, the weight of the revelation pressing down, not crushing, but undeniable. He stared at the sleeping child, then back at the woman. She did not grab my tie randomly, he said. She recognized something. Yes, the woman whispered, she recognized home. The word hung between them, transforming everything. The child was not a coincidence, not a curiosity, not a risk. She was a bridge built from grief and promise. The mafia boss rose slowly, crossing the room, until he stood near the couch looking down at the child. He did not touch her, he simply stood there, as if guarding her from shadows that no longer had power. "My son made you promise something," he said quietly. The woman nodded, tears sliding freely now. "He asked me to make sure you did not disappear into the dark. He asked me to help you smile again, if I ever could." She laughed softly through tears. "I did not think I would ever see you again." He turned back to her, eyes wet but clear. "He kept his promise," he said simply. "He sent me an angel." The woman shook her head. "No, he sent you a reminder that love does not die, it moves, it waits, it finds new places to land." They stood there in silence, understanding settling deep and irreversible. The child slept peacefully, unaware that her small act had unraveled years of grief and secrecy. And power. The mafia boss understood now why restraint mattered, why protection was sacred, why he would never allow harm near her, or the woman who had carried his son's final song into the future. The truth had changed everything. And nothing would ever be the same again. The morning arrived quietly, without ceremony, the kind of morning that felt earned rather than given. The woman stood by the window holding a warm cup. She had not yet tasted, watching the city breathe below her. The child sat on the floor nearby, arranging crayons in careful lines, humming the song again, softer now, no longer a bridge but a comfort. The woman listened, and for the first time did not feel the need to brace herself against it. The melody no longer opened wounds, it sealed them. The mafia boss entered the room without the weight he once carried. His presence still commanded space, but it no longer pressed down on it. Instead, it held steady, protective, intentional. He paused near the child, lowering himself to her level, not as a ruler, not as a force, but as a man choosing gentleness. She looked up at him, smiling like she always had, like nothing in the world had ever been uncertain. He smiled back, and something fundamental settled into place. The world outside did not change overnight. Enemies still existed, power still demanded vigilance, danger never truly disappeared, but the rules shifted subtly, and those who paid attention understood something new. The boss did not rule through fear alone anymore, he ruled through clarity and choice and restraint, and that made him more dangerous than ever to those who underestimated him. The woman no longer stood at the edges, she did not shrink into corners or memorize exits the way she once had. She still noticed everything, still read rooms with practiced precision, but her posture changed. Her shoulders no longer curved inward, her gaze lifted, meeting the world without apology. She had not lost her caution, she had gained grounding. There was a difference. The child moved freely, laughing loudly, drawing pictures that covered entire pages. She spoke his name without hesitation, without fear. And when she reached for his hand, he took it every time, not because he needed to, but because he chose to. That choice echoed louder than any vow. In the days that followed, decisions were made quietly, alliances adjusted, boundaries were drawn not through blood, but through authority that no longer tolerated cruelty disguised as tradition. The syndicate learned quickly that the child was not a weakness, she was a line that could not be crossed. The woman was not a guest, she was presence, and the boss stood beside her, not in front, not above, but with. One evening, as the city lights flickered on like stars scattered too close together, the three of them stood on a balcony, overlooking the streets below. The woman felt the air move around them, alive, full of possibility. She realized then that she was no longer counting steps to escape, no longer calculating angles of danger. She was standing still, and the stillness did not feel like armor anymore, it felt like peace. He spoke then, not with grand declarations, but with truth that carried weight. "I will not ask you to stay," he said. "I will not cage you with promises or protection you do not want. If you choose this life, you choose it freely. And if you ever choose to leave, you do so without fear." The woman looked at him, really looked at the man who had once ruled through silence and shadow, who now offered something far rarer than power. She nodded slowly. "I am not staying because I am afraid," she said. "I am staying because I am seen." The child tugged at both their hands, pulling them closer together, insisting on closeness the way children do, When they know something is right, the mafia boss laughed softly, a sound few had ever heard, and the woman felt tears rise not from pain but release. The city below carried on, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place above it, a family not born from blood but from loss and choice and love that refused to disappear. The woman had spent years avoiding everyone, convinced that invisibility was the only way to survive, but the moment the mafia boss walked in, and the child grabbed his tie, the truth revealed itself. Some connections do not ask permission. Some healing does not follow rules. And some people are found not because they are powerful, but because they are broken in the same place. The woman no longer disappeared. She belonged.